is AEW Unrestricted. I am Will Washington. She is Aubrey Edwards.
Hi.
We're talking about Sting. Because look, we've got, this is a special edition of AEW Unrestricted. No guests today. Instead, we're going to be talking about the Stinger. Because we've got an important event coming up here. March 3rd, Greensboro Coliseum, Greensboro, North Carolina, AEW Revolution. It's the final match of Sting's career. One half of the AEW World Tag Team Champions, Sting, will be defending those titles against two guys that I consider to be dear friends in Matthew and Nicholas Jackson, the EVPs. And what I find interesting is that these last few weeks we've truly gotten to see who they really are, and for some that's been quite a shock. But they are on this quest now to retake their position atop All Elite Wrestling, atop the tag team division, atop AEW as the EVPs, and they want to hold those AEW tag team championships. But it's going to take going through Sting and Darby Allin. And being where we are right now, it's a fun period because we know that the end is right around the corner for Sting, right? He announced last October that this is it. He is going to hang up those boots.
He's like, done. Like, he made it very clear, like, no, I ain't coming back again. We are done.
This is it. He is done. And what a crazy way he's chosen to go out. With just everything he's done these last few months, just thinking about back at Daly's place with the tornado tag match. But talking about Sting, I think this is an appropriate time to kind of relive some of our favorite Sting memories and talk about what Sting's time in AEW has meant, because it's been crazy. When he first showed up at Daly's place, that was December 2nd, I want to say.
2020.
And when he first showed up, I remember thinking, oh, that's really cool, Sting's here. That's a really cool moment. I don't expect him to wrestle, but that'll be cool to see, what Sting's going to offer to AEW. And it's like, not only has he wrestled, but I have gotten to see, and I should preface this for those who don't know by saying that my favorite wrestler growing up was Sting.
Really?
Every single aspect of Sting was my favorite. I was a big WCW guy. And the reason for that was Sting. I felt like it didn't matter what the WWF was doing at the time. They didn't have Sting, so they weren't going to be as cool. I like Man Called Sting. It didn't matter. And then it was like right around the time when wrestling, when I was starting to feel as a kid, like wrestling's a little bit hokey and cheesy. It's like Sting turned his character around right at the exact point it needed to for me, because I wanted wrestling to feel a little bit cooler. And then all of a sudden, here comes Sting with the dark hair all of a sudden, and he's wearing crow face paint, and he's not talking, he's just pointing a baseball bat. And I'm just like, this is even cooler. Like, he just went from the coolest wrestler of that early 90s period to now all of a sudden, as the world is transformed, so his Sting. He's always my favorite. But I said all this to say that Sting, being in AEW, I have gotten to see him wrestle so many times, whether it was working in AEW or as a fan. And I have always cherished every single one of those matches because I always thought that this match could be it. And he kept upping the ante. I don't know. Aubrey, what has your experience with Sting been like being in AEW?
Oh, man. So as I've mentioned on this podcast before, like, I didn't grow up watching wrestling. So a lot of my knowledge of wrestling is what has been on TV in the last 10 years and what people have told me has been important in the history of wrestling. So my introduction to Sting was sort of when he came back to the other place initially. Like, that's the first time I ever saw him wrestle. And I'm like, oh, this guy's cool. But to quote you, one of the things I love is, like, when someone's a big deal, if we make them a big deal, people believe it. And that was the thing that I'm like, oh, this guy's the real deal. So when he retired the first time, it's one of those like, okay, cool. He had a good run. He's kind of went out on top. This is great. Awesome. So I legitimately had no idea. And I remember going to work that day in Daly's place. And for those that aren't familiar with Jacksonville, that venue is outdoors. And in December, it is quite cold. So the snow, in hindsight, made a lot of sense.
Yes.
But I remember that day where we're backstage and they had like this one, it's like a garage door that's typically open because people are just going in and out. And I remember them having it closed. And I'm like, oh, it's just because it's really cold outside because I don't pick up on things. And I had the match right before that segment where Sting debuted. So I'm just doing my thing, whatever, blah, 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 making sure the talent gets to the back. And I go through the tunnel and Sting is literally standing there. And it's like when you're in that moment, you kind of just don't know how to respond. I'm like, hey, sup, Sting? And I like fist bump him because that was what felt right in the moment. And I'm just like, oh, this is cool. So immediately you're watching this thing where, did we have fans back then? I don't remember.
Yeah, there were fans in the building. Yeah.
There was a very small amount. Like we had started having
There was
people
enough
back
to where when Sting's name comes up on the Tron, there was a palpable
people
pop.
screamed.
Yeah, there was a pop. And it was enough to where like, that it was the first thing I remember from the pandemic that made me feel like wrestling again. Because to hear that reaction for the name Sting coming up on the Tron, it was, it was a genuine surprise. It was really cool. It's like, I had my hunches as to what was going on because there were like little rumors of things on the internet of like, oh, his merch has been pulled from the other place. And it's like, okay, but why would that be? And then when I saw the snow and heard the opening notes and I'm like, I wonder what this is. Is there a chance this is? And then the word Sting comes up on the Tron. I'm like, yes,
dude,
it's Sting. And it was so great. Tony Schiavone shouting, it's Sting. Like everything was so perfect in that moment. And yeah, but to think that he has had a 20-something and career in AEW.
Insane.
Yeah. I thought maybe we were going to see like 3 or 4 matches total, and the fact that we've seen him so many times has been great. And it's interesting because it started with we talked about the debut at Winter Is Coming. That eventually led to a match at Revolution with Sting and Darby versus Team Taz, but it was a cinematic match. And I remember thinking, this is the best we're going to get. And this was great. This was an insane 20 minutes of, like, when you talk about cinematic matches from that period, this felt truly cinematic. It wasn't just like a match where, there's cameras rolling and, you're watching something that's obviously pre-taped.
It was a movie. Give this thing an Oscar.
Yeah, this thing felt like a genuine movie. And again, I remember thinking, this is the best we're going to get. And that's okay. I'm perfectly okay with, like, if this is what we get from Sting, we do cinematic matches, I am okay with this. But I remember thinking, this is really cool. Like, Darby Allin is insane. And everything Darby did in that little 20 minutes was we just recently saw him tossed across the ring by the Don Callis family. But I just got reminded of the fact that Team Taz very much did that to him as well.
Yep.
Through glass. And but again, we really got a taste of what Sting was going to be able to offer. And I remember hearing that this was the moment, this was the match that kind of awakened what was lying dormant in Sting and made him realize, I can do this. Because like in the lead up to it, we knew what caused Sting to have to retire the first time. It was a neck injury in a match in Houston, Texas. And it was a main event match too. It was for the WWE Championship. And so I think everybody for a long time kind of had this idea in their mind that, Sting's probably fragile, right? And I remember, like, it's one of those things where you care. You care. It is a delicate situation. You don't want to see the man get hurt. You don't want to see what happened before.
Wrestling is scripted, but that these guys are putting their bodies on the line.
Yes.
And I think all of us know the reality of the situation. Like, Sting is an older gentleman. And he's had an injury. So anytime we see him in the ring, we're like, oh, there's that like sense of like we're all his parents, like, please don't get hurt.
Yeah. And so they definitely played on that for us because during the lead up to this match, he took a power bomb from Brian Cage, and I remember feeling like, what is going on here? No, he did not just take a power bomb from Brian Cage.
Brian Cage just killed him.
Yeah, and I'm like, oh my God. And just thinking, this is insane. I can't believe what I'm watching here. I can't believe that Brian Cage just power bombed Sting. And I'm like, that's the end of it. This is it. It's over.
And it's so funny thinking now, like, the crazier shit that he's done.
Oh, yeah.
And there are frequently times where, like, we'll finish up a match and I'll look at Sting and go, Darby has been a bad influence on you. And he just laughs. Like,
and it gets crazier and crazier.
Every freaking time.
It does. But, this all led to, again, what I thought for me was a really, really important moment. Because I'm talking about Double or Nothing 2021 with referee Aubrey Edwards.
Yeah, I literally felt like shitting my pants that day. Like, oh my God.
I was at that show. That was the first time Daly's Place had truly opened its doors back up. I was at the House Always Wins house show before that, but to
that
do the
wasn't sold
pay-per-view.
out.
Yeah. To do the pay-per-view with full capacity. That's what it was. That's the term I'm looking for, was a full capacity show. We had everybody back in the building, and everybody's high-fiving, hugging. It's like the first time that a lot of people had gotten to be with each other in a very long time at that point. I remember I was sitting right behind Britt Baker's parents. That was the night that Britt won the AEW Women's World Championship, and so I had this second row seat. Actually, a friend of yours, Brad Williams. I was actually sitting.
I love Brad.
He was sitting like directly in front of me. And again, so it's the men of the year versus Sting and Darby.
Dude, so like you kind of, anytime you tell the story, it's kind of sets the tone of like how special that show already was, independent of the card that we had and like all of the crazy things that happened that night. But I remember that match in particular because I'll come into the pay-per-view, I don't really know what I'm doing. And like I had been assigned this match and I just look at it and I think I text my husband like, dude, I'm doing a Sting match. Like, oh my God, this is what I think Bryce had even said, like, dude, have fun. Like there's those moments where you're like, oh, this is insane. Like we talk about history in wrestling a lot. Like it's almost an overused word at this point, but it was one thing to see the cinematic match with Sting and see how good that was. And then to know, kind of going off what you were saying before, like, oh, this is going to get crazier. Sting's going to go all out. This is going to be awesome. And I remember calling the match with the guys, and you could tell, like, in Ethan Page's eyes, how legitimately excited he was for this match. So, yeah, we're going to do this, and we're going to do this. Like, it's like we're all kids in candy stores, just like, oh my God, like, we're working with friggin' Sting, man. This is so cool. And there's this amazing picture I have saved where he has, I forget who it was, but he has somebody in the Scorpion Deathlock and we're just screaming at each other. I'm like, how friggin' cool is this moment? So it's like, that's why I love Sting. He's just this great guy that as the fans watch the show, I think they appreciate how awesome he is. But everyone backstage appreciates how awesome he is. And there is so much more to talk about Sting and the incredible person that he is and the amazing matches he's had at AEW. So much more coming up on AEW Unrestricted. AEW Unrestricted, Aubrey and Will talking about Sting, the myth, the man, the legend, the icon. He's just so many things to so many people. He's done so much for AEW. He has meant so much to all of us. And many of us have had the opportunity to work with Sting. I've been fortunate to have multiple opportunities to work with Sting. And it's one of those things where you're talking to people about a match and then they kind of propose things where you're like, that's kind of crazy. Are you sure? And we talk about it. We make sure we're all on the same page. It's great. Awesome. But there was a particular match that he had with him and Darby versus, I think it was Chris and Sammy. And there was this spot where they're climbing a ladder and Darby's climbing it. And then Sting climbs the ladder. And there's this moment in the crowd where everyone goes, oh no, Sting's the one who's going to go through the table. And he does. And it ends up a little short. And I get out of the ring. Part of my job is like, if there's an issue, I'm the one to check on the talent and immediately assess the medical situation. And you just see him look up and his lip is split wide open. And he looks at me and goes, how bad is it? I go, well, your lip's split open, but everything else seems pretty okay. And he goes, okay. And you see the determination in his eyes because we're running up on the end of the show. Like, it is main event. He's got to get back in the ring. We got to start going to the finish. And I go, are you ready for this, Sting? And he goes, and he's like hyping himself up. He's like, yeah. And I'm like, all right, then you fucking got this, Sting. And like, he dives back in and the whole match is just insane. Like,
I remember that because I had to just look it up because I'm like, okay, this is all feeling really familiar. This is a situation where I was there. I was working there at this time.
Yep.
And yeah, that was
very recent.
Yeah, that was Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. That was I definitely very much remember this. This was right after Forbidden Door, and you know, that was, and Sammy's told this story, so I feel it's appropriate to tell here because previously, just a few days prior at Forbidden Door, there was a multi-man tag match. Sammy Guevara hits a 630 through a table on Sting. And what was wild about that moment, and Sammy's told this story, was that Sting was supposed to move. And Sammy was supposed to crash through the table. But Sting doesn't get out in time and ends up just taking the 630 through a table from Sammy Guevara. And what a moment. What a moment that ended up being, because when Sting walked through the curtain after that, I was just like, my God. Because I talked to Sting earlier that morning, and I was asking him how he felt about the match and all of that. And when I was like, I didn't know you were going to take that 630 from Sammy. And he's like, yeah, I didn't either. He's like, it was great, though.
Well, one of the things I love about it, too, is like when you're structuring a tag match, you're trying to think about like, one of the rules is that you can have an opponent come in and break up a pin. And it's a moment that we use very, very much for storytelling purposes. So you have to think about taking out someone so that they don't have the opportunity to come in and break up a pin. And something like that, like a 630 through a table, would take someone out. But then Sting just gets up and keeps going. Yeah. And there's very few people where in kayfabe that would make sense.
Well, and so that's the thing I wanted to talk about was there's one particular match, and it was from August 18th, 2021. And I remember this vividly because what was important about this match was that it took place in Houston, Texas. Houston, of course, being the very city where Sting wrestled for what they thought was the last time when he faced Seth Rollins in that main event. And all of a sudden here we have Sting wrestling again, Houston, Texas. It was Sting and Darby versus Angelo Parker and Matt Menard, at the time known as 2.0. And this was a match I don't think anybody knew really what to expect here. And they just blew the roof off the place. And Sting, of course, going through a table. And it was the first time that, for a lot of fans I know who hadn't experienced Sting, it was
Sting
the first time
tables,
they had truly ever seen that spot where Sting goes to the table and gets right back up. The full-on no-sell. Crowd goes insane, starts beating his chest. And that, I think, for a lot of people, you know, the pay-per-view audience, I think, if you just do the math, I think most people know pay-per-view isn't exposed to as many people as television is. And so we had, up until this point, only seen Sting on pay-per-view. And it was almost like this mythical thing to a lot of fans of like, oh yeah, maybe Sting can still go. But to do this in Houston, Texas, in front of these fans, it was the first time on Dynamite. And for the reaction to be what it was, I remember looking online and seeing people go, oh, Sting's really back. Like, I thought this is maybe just like a one-time thing, but no, he is back, and this is actually really cool. And for that to then lead into another show I was at, which was the first Grand Slam where Sting and Darby then goes on to take on FTR. We talk about the fact that they're ending this run with the Young Bucks, but they also got to be in there with another one of the greatest tag teams in professional wrestling. Sting and Darby versus FTR at Grand Slam was a hoot. It was so much fun. These guys, again, FTR is, if you told me pick a tag team that you can trust, Sting and Darby are going to tear the house down with. FTR right off the bat. That's the first team I would name, and I would absolutely be correct in that, because again, this was another one of those moments where I got to learn that Sting is really back. Sting is here, and he is in there with one of the best tag teams out there, two of the best professional wrestlers in the business, and they just killed it out there at Arthur Ashe Stadium with that many fans, everybody going nuts. It was one of those things where I wasn't sure what to expect, but I was pleasantly surprised. I was so happy to have seen Sting that night, and they just killed it out there.
I feel like that's like the story of Sting's AEW career almost, where everyone is just like, oh, there's no way. And then he just exceeds expectations. And I feel like after the 3 years that he's been with us, we would have learned our lesson by now.
Yes.
I just stopped being surprised. But it's one of those things where like him winning the tag titles with Darby, like, it's surprising, but also not surprising at all. Like, they've had an unstoppable tag team run, literally undefeated. So it's like, on paper, this makes sense. But in my mind, when I heard this, I was like, oh, they might lose. It's like, but no, Sting is literally unstoppable. And he doesn't exist. He's not a human being.
And it's incredible how I don't think people truly understand. And I don't think we can make it possible to understand it on this podcast. But he's so selfless in everything he does, whether it's in the ring, whether it's backstage. And he wants so badly for everybody involved in what he does to look good.
Yes.
And it's just so incredible to watch it take place and watch him still be the Sting he is.
So one of the things I love about wrestling is, and the 7 or so years I've been a part of it now, is you see people that are great people, like not even just phenomenal wrestlers, but like at their core, they are phenomenal human beings. And Sting is one of those people. And I feel like that is a big reason why he's having the career he is and why he's had the career he has. Because he's been so supportive of others, because he's been so much about making sure that everyone looks good in a moment. Like, that's the kind of people you want to keep around, because that's the kind of person that makes this business better. And I think all of us benefit not only from an in-ring perspective, but also just when you have good people like that around, I think it just kind of builds up the whole room. And I know every time Sting shows at the building, he's got a smile on his face and he's so happy to see everybody. And he'll stop and he'll say hi, like, hey, how are you doing? It's like, oh, it's great. How's your wife? Like, we just have these amazing conversations. And it's like, he's just there to have a good time. It's like, it's almost like watching a 5-year-old play with their favorite toy. Like, they're just so over the moon and ecstatic. And just, you see this pure joy. And Sting is just like that as a wrestler.
He really is. And, you know, I watched him. There's one particular wrestler who, you know, there was a moment it took place in the ring, and this wrestler sold for Sting like they were afraid of him, right? And then when they got backstage, Sting's like, you don't have to do all of that. He's like, you know, he's like, you know what? You're like, you don't have to be that afraid of me. He's like, you know, protect yourself, protect your character. You know, he's like, I'll be fine. I'm Sting. You don't have to do that. And
I'm Sting. Like, in case you didn't know.
Yeah, he's like, I'll be fine. I'm Sting. Like, you don't have to sell that much for it. And I just thought, God, man, to be that giving as a performer at this stage of your career, you don't have to be, because everybody in the business, everybody in the room respects you. It's so cool.
He could be selfish and no one would care.
Nobody.
Because it's Sting, and he has earned it at this point.
Yeah.
But he chooses to still be giving, which is, I think, like the true definition of someone who is a leader.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. There's a few other matches. And obviously we're gonna keep going because that's what this show is. But again, just thinking about who the matches Sting's been able to have in AEW. And we're talking about, of course, facing the EVPs and Matthew and Nicholas coming up here at Revolution. But this isn't the first time that him and Darby have stepped in the ring with, at the time, the Young Bucks. Because we actually got to see at the first Forbidden Door the team of the Dudes with Attitudes.
Yes.
Sting and Darby and Shingo taking on, and it was nice at a show called Forbidden Door and being a New Japan AEW branded show. And it always feels weird to me that, like, not gonna lie, working in AEW and seeing like that a Bullet Club exists and that the Young Bucks like aren't a part of it. Like it's been 5 years and I still feel like, how can this be? But anyway, to do a brief reunion, and it was the Bullet Club it was El Phantasmo and the Young Bucks. This match was such a blast. Sting diving off the stage, off of the
crazy
the top of the tunnel. Again, yes, an absolute crazy man. I bought it too. I was front row at that show and seeing, we have Sting's entrance, but where's Sting? We didn't see him. And I'm like, all right. It's one of those things where for whatever reason in my head, I'm like, yeah, I can buy this, that he's not here. Or something going on, right? I love suspending
You're looking
my disbelief.
around, seeing where he's going to come out of.
Like, yeah, and I'm like, okay. And then, we did the flash of him in the rafters, all that. And I'm like, okay. And then when he dives off the stage, again, just a madman. This is the Stinger. This is who he is. And, he took the super kicks. It was beautiful. He took the super kicks, and again, he's the only person who, in professional wrestling, when you see a no-sell happen, or even a lack of a sell happen, there's anger all across the board, except for Sting.
Yep.
Because when Sting does this, when Sting takes somebody's finisher, sits right back up, and beats his chest, crowd's gonna go nuts for it. It's a moment, and almost every wrestler is almost willing and wants that moment for their finish to happen. And it's great. Like, who else could that happen with in professional wrestling but Sting? And it was such a cool moment to see that happen. And for him to be a part of that first Forbidden Door, I don't think, Forbidden Door is one of those shows where when you know what New Japan brings and you know what particular style of in-ring action AEW is known for, there's a certain type of match you want to see at Forbidden Door. You're like, okay, I know what guy I want to see face this guy, and that's typically how it goes. Danielson and Okada made sense, right? Kenny Omega and Will Ospreay made sense. But this is one of those things where it's like, Sting's not that performer, but at the same time, you can't have Forbidden Door without that kind of moment from Sting, and it worked out perfectly, and it was incredible, and I just love seeing it, and I love talking about Sting. I could talk about Sting till the cows come home, and we're going to be talking about far more of Sting right here when AEW Unrestricted continues. AEW Unrestricted, it's Aubrey and Will. We're talking about the Stinger. Yes, and we were all little Stingers at one point. And so
I'm like a little Stinger now.
It's I
wasn't
cool
then, but now I'm just like, it's Sting. He's here.
Honestly, that's how it is with my kids, because I think my kids truly understand the importance of who Sting was. Like, we'll go back and we watch. I showed my kids the War Games '92 match, which is highly considered one of the greatest matches of all time. But it's Sting Squadron versus the Dangerous Alliance, and again, we're talking about 1992, and the fact that Sting and Dustin Rhodes, by the way, are in that match, and for those guys to still just be kicking ass the way they are today, and I think by showing that match to my kids, which is an extremely violent match, to go figure, but for me to have shown that match to my kids and they kind of walk away going like, wow, okay, now I understand how important these guys are to wrestling today and why it's important that they're still going today and they're still in a position to be giving back to the business that they the way they are, because it was such a hot crowd back then. And for that to be happening today, I think is just really, really cool. And I love that a young generation, when I see little kids buying Sting masks in our crowds, and but then I also see older fans who recognize what Sting brought to the table. He honestly, I think, you know, we talk about the Monday Night Wars and things along those lines, and I always just think back to the fact that he was one of the biggest reasons why there was a competitive landscape in professional wrestling, because, you know, you could have one brand that had Hogan and had Savage and all of that. And obviously all of those guys eventually went to WCW, but you could have all of those guys present at the top of WWF, but as long as WCW had Sting, they were always going to be seen as just as cool to me. You know, for me, it was like, even prior to the Monday Night Wars, when you talk about late 80s, early 90s, and you're talking about the WCW Saturday Night and 605 on the Superstation, Sting was the reason to be watching that show. It was, you know, obviously Flair as well, but like Sting was the protagonist of this show. Like, he was the reason I wanted to see this program. And again, for him to be doing this all again in AEW, it's meant a lot to me as a fan. It's meant a lot to our company. And we've still just seen so much happen. Like, Full Gear last 2022. We had Sting and Darby versus Jeff Jarrett and Jay Lethal.
Oh my God.
Which again, Sting, just insanity. This man jumping off of a barricade on a Satnam and Jay Lethal.
You're speechless.
I am speechless because the amount of times I can say Sting jumping off X and it's still like just a really cool moment. That
Which one was the one where he went through like 3 tables off of like the lower bowl?
Yeah, so that was Revolution 2022. It was Sting, Darby, and Sammy Guevara versus the Andrade Hardy family office. That's right, because Isaiah Cassidy was also in that match. And
I remember I was on the stage because those guys were doing a table spot.
Yes.
And I was like, when we were calling the match, like, I'm focused on what those guys are doing because I need to be over on that side. And we had another ref entirely over by the Sting thing happening. And I just remember standing at the stage and just like looking over and seeing a human being fall, like multiple stories. Like, what the hell? And that was 2 years ago. Like,
yeah. Well, you know, it's funny, and I'm looking up in my phone right now because as I'm recalling a lot about that match, one of the specific things I'm remembering, and so that would have been March of 2022, because again, every time this kind of stuff comes up, I was front row for that show. And if I say March of 2022, I'm pretty sure that match spilled out right in front of me. So I have like literal pictures of so much going on directly in front of my face. I'm pretty sure there's a Sting picture I was trying to pull up for the video version of this show. Let me see. Oh yeah, there's Sting and there's Darby right in front of me.
Oh my God, look at you. That's
sorry,
cool,
my
man.
picture cut out there, but there was Darby right in front of me, and then there's Sting, and there he is. There's Sting, literally right in front of me, as that match just unfolded.
Like, Sting is just so cool. And it's one of those things where, like, I want to be Sting when I grow up, but, like, just without all the tables and, like, stupid violent stuff. Like, I'll leave that out. But, like, how cool he is as a person, as a performer, as a leader. Like, he's just such a great human being. And I'm just so grateful that we at AEW have had the opportunity to learn and grow from him, that we've gotten to give him this opportunity to be the legend that he is again and give him another opportunity. And I've learned through all of the promotion of Revolution, like, how important the Greensboro Coliseum is to Sting. And I love that whoever made the decision, I'm sure it was Tony, But whoever made the decision to have his last match in that building, like independent of like, it doesn't matter how far it is to travel, doesn't matter what the market is. Like, honestly, it's like, we're doing it that building for Sting. And that is so friggin' cool. And I love that this is how he gets to end his career, because it's like he didn't really have the opportunity to pick before, but now it's like this is quite literally a storybook ending. He's walking into this pay-per-view tag champion with someone who he's been teaming with by his side for his entire time at AEW in Darby Allin, in a building that means so much to him in his career, along with Ric Flair, one of his longtime friends. Like, I am just so over the moon. And it's moments like this in wrestling that make me truly proud to be a wrestling fan, that like we all get to just experience this in real time.
But it also gets to happen with a lot of nervousness going on, right? Because
there's always nervousness when Sting goes out in the ring.
But it's also against two guys who are wildly hated right now in Matthew and Nicholas Jackson. And I'm getting the names right, so
Matthew Ronjon.
Yeah, so don't find me. But for those two, where they are right now, and knowing that they have the opportunity here to not only become the AEW World Tag Team Champions, but to put Sting on the shelf permanently. There's a lot of pressure that comes with that, because when you talk about being two of the most hated guys in professional wrestling right now, and it's those two, and knowing that having that on your resume is both an accolade and also something that's gonna keep you hated for even longer. And so it's a tough one.
This is what like wrestling is built on.
Yeah.
You have a main event in a huge show with the most hated heels against the most loved baby faces in what is going to be an excellent historic match, like regardless of what the outcome is. And I'm legitimately excited for either outcome, whether it's the Bucks that win or whether it's Sting and Darby that win. It's just the punctuation that is this moment is going to be really, really cool to be a part of. And I'm so happy we get to do it.
I'm happy as well. You can't. It's going to be hard to get one, but if you can come across one, AEWTix.com. If you can be the Greensboro Coliseum, you should be at the Greensboro Coliseum. It's March 3rd. And if you can't be there, that's okay, because it's also available on pay-per-view. All traditional pay-per-view. It's going to be on Bleacher Report. It's everywhere you can watch AEW pay-per-view. You do not want to miss AEW Revolution. This is the final opportunity to see Sting do what Sting does best.
You're literally not going to get another chance. He has said so. We all believe it. We're all on board with it, and we're all there, and we're all supportive for him. So definitely check it out. Revolution, get a ticket. Try your damnedest to get a ticket. It's going to be a wild show, biggest show we've done in 2024 by far. I'm so legitimately excited to see this match, and I'm so excited that we got to talk about this today, Will. We're only like a couple weeks away. This is insane.
I know. We've got so much else going on in AEW, and you can check out all of it. You can check out AEW Unrestricted. You can check out this show, because we got new episodes available every Thursday on your favorite podcast platforms. New episodes are available video-wise on our YouTube channel every Monday. Also, check out AEW Dynamite. It's every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern. AEW Rampage is every Friday at 10 p.m. Eastern. We've also got AEW Collision, Colliders Unite, every Saturday, 8 p.m. Eastern. We've got Ring of Honor available on WatchROH.com, on Honor Club every Thursday. We've got some big business coming up here in AEW March 13th, Boston, Massachusetts. That's going to be a hoot as well. We've got so much. I know, that's my word today. We've got so much, and we talk about it all here. This is AEW Unrestricted. I'm Will Washington. She's Aubrey Edwards. We'll see you next time. Have a great day. Peace.